Thank you. We're very honored and proud to be middle-aged, and grateful to have lived so long, as I'm sure many of y'all are. So we're glad to be in the house with so many of our old friends tonight for a celebration of Assotto Saint's Sacred Spells Collected Works. This is a book that has been a very long time in the making, and some of us maybe thought it never would come. And so the fact that it is here feels sacred in and of itself. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by the Counter Narrative Project, the Atlanta Queer Literary Festival, and the Women and Gender Collections at the Georgia State University Archives. These are all organizations made up of people who we love and care about, and we're so grateful to be in community with all of you who make Queer Atlanta happen. So thank you. Our co-hosts tonight are Duncan E. Teague and Franklin Abbott. Duncan has been in Atlanta for 35 plus years and has been in some kind of relationship with Karis Books and More since his second year in Atlanta. He has been writing and performing poetry, writing for gay magazines, for HIV/AIDS, and now for Abundant Love Unitarian Universalist Congregation almost every week. He is the founding minister of this West End Unitarian Universalist Congregation. His first poetry in a gay anthology was published by Assotto Saint, In the Road Before Us, and he is very proud to have gotten to know Assotto personally. He is the surviving senior member of the Adoti Muse, a gay Negro ensemble, who have been doing the poetry on stage as theater since longer than he would like to admit. Previous work of the Adoti Muse is available on their CD, Ain't Got Sense Enough to Be Shamed. This poet, now Reverend, is proof that you can survive prostate cancer, stay with your gay husband for more than 25 years, and start a church, all after you are eligible for AARP newsletters and coupons. And he is joined by Franklin Abbott, who is a poet, psychotherapist, editor, and activist. He published Assotto Saint in his anthology, New Men, New Minds, which was published by Crossing Press in 1987, and in two magazines where he served as poetry editor, RFD and Changing Men. He and Saint became close friends and correspondents, giving each other much needed support during the worst years of the AIDS epidemic. Saint's letters to Abbott are part of his chapters of his papers in the Women and Gender collection in the archives of Georgia State University. Franklin is the author of 3 anthologies of writings about men and masculinity, 2 volumes of poetry, and a recording of original music and poetry, Don't Go Back to Sleep. So we could not think of 2 better people to host this evening in celebration of Assotto Saint. I'm going to turn it over to them now, but I do want to let folks know a couple of things real quick. We will be opening it up for folks to ask questions later in the evening. I'll be bringing a microphone around to you if you're physically here. For accessibility reasons and for our folks watching at home, please do speak into the mic and wait for me to bring it to you. If you are watching virtually, go ahead and put your questions in the chat at any time. And we do have a photographer in the house to capture this beautiful event, so just know that that's happening. And if you do not want to be photographed, please see us at the end and we can talk about that. But in general, they're capturing what's happening on stage, not the crowd. So without further ado, please welcome Duncan Teague, Franklin Abbott, and all of our beautiful readers who you're about to meet in a celebration of Assotto Saint.
Wow. Thank you. Where to start? First of all, I would thank you for keeping the ground sacred where we are at Karis. Because Karis has been the place where folks have met, where folks have come to understand who they were, have decided, well, when I write my piece, I'm gonna read it at Karis. 50 years. I was a child when they started.
In the womb.
however y'all want to put it, leave it alone. Anyway, we're so honored to be here, and especially on behalf of Assotto, because when I met Assotto, he was publishing The Road Before Us. 100 Black gay poets in one book in the 80s, right? Yeah, in the 80s. So for the younger folks in the room, yes, we were already in books then. Some of us were already out and not worried about being in books. And we're very honored to do so. Our sponsors will be recognized by Franklin, who I have known many years as a small child. And I see friends here and some people who used to be friends. Anyway, and we want to thank all the people online. Do we have any knowledge about how many are coming in online?
It's a bunch of folks. They're in the chat.
A bunch of folks.
Lorraine Fontana is in the chat, loving,
oh my goodness.
Sending love.
Okay. Thank you for however you got in the room, being here in the room. Thank you. That's powerful. I was going to ask two of the elder women statespeople of our community if they brought their Bibles for the opening. I know better. Anyway. But we'll open with the words, with my own words that Assotto decided to publish, because when he published them, we had a small disagreement. Assotto was a very astute editor, and he was very urban, as he had left Haiti and become a lot in New York and other places. I'm not going into all that, but Assotto was much, y'all. He was about 6'2", strikingly handsome, in full leather, whether white or black leather. Yeah, white leather outfits on a 6'2" black gay man who could be as butch as you needed. And then he would do some of his stuff in full drag. I've heard that I did some stuff too, and Assotto was extremely respectful of me. And there were times when we would be at a conference, a forum, and he would say, well, The Road Before Us is going to do a reading. Miss Thing, you need to be there. And it wasn't a question. No. And I was really honored to do it. The poem I wrote was during the time of the African American Lesbian Gay Alliance here in Atlanta. And we did our thing, I think, for about 10 or 12 years, starting in the 80s. We might have made it to the end of the 90s, I'm not sure. But that was a fulcrum of the epidemic. And we were the African American Lesbian Gay Alliance in the city of Atlanta, when a lot of our folks were not embracing those words, and certainly not publicly. And we even got in the Journal-Constitution with a photograph. So we were breaking a lot of trends by doing all that stuff, and we lost a lot of members. And we had to cope with it as an organization. And this is one of my views of how we were coping. In the backyard for Walter or our fried chicken customs. I absolutely love chicken on paper plates in hot backyards after a good funeral. Round Labor Day time, women, dignified, cultured, bronze to black, sitting in circles round the serving table, men in the shade. Dressed up like Reverend Williams on First Sunday in white cotton iron shirts and colorful ties, sweating. I'm glad our city ways have not taken a good backyard funeral dinner from us. We never needed that much money to be this classy, to have this much fun, to honor one so festive, as though Walter was there. I know I heard child star in the seldom warm breeze behind some funny remark. We tailed the tale from the soul. We laughed the life energy. We loved our own through the hurt, the real hurt. It is healing to know I will drop in on backyard chicken dinners, laughing with my family on my way to Walter's new place. I had only been published once before at Benedictine College with a poem that was slightly erotic, but I had capitalized every time I used the pronoun he, so they thought it was religious. And I was happy about it. It's so good to see you. Next time, come on time. Anyway.
I think all the time I've been making y'all start.
You know. Anyway, I will gladly hand the phone over to Franklin as I remember some of the stories about Assotto.
I've got my own microphone. Yeah. Hi. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Assotto that I knew. And I knew him as Yves Lubin. Yves, Assotto was the name that he used for his performing and his writing. But Yves was my friend. And they were really the same person, but two different people. I brought some photographs. This one here in the sort of ornate frame. The frame was made by Carl Christian, who is an Atlanta artist. And was perfect for this picture that Assotto gave me. The photographer was named Alcindor. And it's a publicity photo, and it shows Yves as Assotto, in a long robe, looking kind of clerical. He was very much influenced by his Catholic background and his Haitian background. So, there was always a mix of Catholicism and voodoo with him and his work. We met each other in 1987. I published my first anthology, New Men, New Minds, which was a collection of stories and essays about men and masculinity, trying to look at masculinity from a pro-feminist perspective. And I had met Yves through publishing his Haiti, A Memory Journey in Changing Men magazine, which was a pro-feminist publication. And we met for the first time at Gay Pride in New York. I remember encountering him at the other country's table and buying another country's t-shirt, which is now in the Women and Gender collection at Georgia State University, along with my correspondence with Yves. So there, you can easily find it. It's online. It's photographs, of his letters written in his handwriting. I really can't read them. Hard time. So the other photographs that I have up here, and Duncan has a couple of things that he placed. This one here was taken by me at the 1987 National March on Washington. We had a demonstration in front of the Internal Revenue Service building protesting that we could not get married. And Yves is here with his partner, Jan, and I was there with a partner and with about 300 or 400 other couples, and it was really quite a magical ceremony. Unfortunately, I hadn't really intended to get married, so then I had to get divorced later. But Yves sort of in his prime. You can see the twinkle in his eye. He was a striking individual, but he also, had a very tender heart. The smaller picture, and these will be up here for you guys to take a look at, the little Polaroid is of Yves with Trey Johnson, who's a young Atlanta poet who died very early in the epidemic. Trey was a wonderful poet and, just a wonderful soul. And he was just so in love with Yves and Yves' work that he went to New York to see him. And, he was quite ill and Trey was quite ill in that photograph. The photograph in the little circular frame was by Robert Giard. And Giard was, he may have photographed some of you. He came through Atlanta. He photographed Rebecca Ransom. I remember that. He photographed me, but I didn't make it into the book. He did a big book of portraits of LGBTQ folks, and Yves, of course, was in the book, and that's a very pensive picture of him. Our relationship was, he lived in New York, I lived in Atlanta. We met at several conferences. He came to Atlanta to do publicity for his last book of poetry, Waiting for Wings. And, we spent time then. We talked on the phone a lot. I would say that characterized our relationship because, we talked through him getting diagnosed, Jan getting diagnosed, so many of his friends dying, Jan dying. I was also, surrounded by death, and his friendship was invaluable. I think that he died when he was 36, and so that is one of the most unfair things I think about the epidemic is that so many gifted and talented people died young and before they could really come into their own. I'm just delighted that Michelle Carlsberg kind of reimagined his book. He had an anthology that he published before his death, Spells for a Voodoo Doll, and she was going to have it republished, but she decided that she wanted to add essays and add material that wasn't in the original book. So, I highly recommend the book as a way of getting to know Yves and getting to know something about that time. We are really, really fortunate to have some great co-sponsors. Morna Gerard is here from the Women and Gender Collection at Georgia State University, where lots of good stuff is archived. If you have stories to tell or material that you want saved for perpetuity, speak with Morna. Charles Stevens is here from the Counter Narrative Project, which is sort of its own little miracle, Charles. Maybe not such a small miracle, but a very important part of the community here in terms of the opportunities afforded. Young Hughley is here representing many different things, including the Atlanta Queer Literary Festival. He is the chairperson of it now. So, yeah. And we will be introducing, the folks who are going to be reading. We're real happy to have Jericho and G. Winston and Michael and Young and thank you, Karis Books and More, ER and Sarah and Patricia. It's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you for making this happen. So I believe our first reader is Young, and I believe you're going to introduce him.
Sure. And as I introduce Young, I'm going to tell a story that I remembered from Assotto. It's a pretty famous one because when we lost, was it Donald? Yeah, Donald Wood, a tall, striking writer from other countries and a New York resident, a really sweet man and very involved in Black gay organizing in New York, and Donald died from HIV. And Donald's family, of course, took care of the funeral arrangements. And Assotto sat there and took all he could take. He rose from his seat when they said if anybody would like to speak. He went down front and he said, "I don't know who you're burying. My friend died of AIDS, and he was a Black gay man who died of AIDS." And he proceeded to read everybody there and honor Donald for who Donald was. At a time when most of us would either meet after these horrible funerals and have something to drink or take something before we went, or maybe in the car. And we were just prepared to hold ourselves through these horrendous funerals that really were doing exactly what Assotto said. They were not burying our friends. They were burying the people that the family wanted to bury. And Assotto wasn't having it. And I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
Because he was real in his writing and in his life, and you just didn't mess with Assotto. I wish that Young and Assotto had encountered each other. You did hear him read, right?
Only on YouTube.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Young Hewley is an Atlanta native, proud Atlanta native, of the large Hewley family. I got to meet Young's mom. She's fabulous. She has quilts in the Smithsonian. Okay, so for those of you who need credentials. Young earned his BA from Morehouse College. He earned 3 executive certificates in nonprofit management from Harvard University, the Kennedy School of Government. He is the recipient of 20+ awards, recognitions, citations, and fellowships for his work in affordable housing, community development, nonprofit management. He's done a little bit of work in the community. In his encore life, he is happy now to spend time writing and exploring the written works of others. In 2018, I can't read that word, but a group of folks published his first book, Images Finally Focused. It is a compilation of poetry, essays, and short stories. And I am so happy to have it because I use it for worship. If you'll welcome Young Hewley.
Hold on 1 second, Young. I don't think we're picking you up. Could you hand your mic to Young, please?
Good evening. I'm really happy to be here today. Right, is it me?
Oh,
Okay. And I'm going to share a work written by Assotto Saint called Hook for Life. It is based on a disco song by the Tramps that was popular in the discos. I don't know how many people remember that particular song.
Yeah.
Hook for Life. Yeah. I was surprised to find out that there were 2 versions of this story. I first discovered it in other countries, and this was the first time it was published. And then later on, I found, and there's 3 pages in here. That's the good news. The bad news is I found it in Brother to Brother, and it's 6 pages in here. But I'm going to abbreviate the read and fill in the pieces as I go. Hooked for Life. There were no tears. There was no time for tears that year. just a tight knot in the pit of my chest where it hurts more each day. Yet it had all come to this. 2-pound plastic bag filled with ash, bits of bones, and fragments of teeth that didn't completely burn. It had all come too quickly. It seemed only yesterday that Riz Park bustled with laughter and WBLS blasted everywhere. Beautiful bodies languished on the sand in colorful swimwear. Volleyball players along with joggers ran up and down the beach. Lifeguards whistled to swimmers straying too far. Vendors hawked soft drinks and ice cream sandwiches. Others hustled cheap cologne and fake gold bracelets. That day of wine and smiles, we were all walking on sunshine. Next to me, on our I Love New York beach mat, dreads cascading down his head, Duke eased through his 100 daily push-ups. Every inch of his 6-foot taut body glistened deliciously like honey. Many a passing glance sized him up, but the man was all mine and had been for 10 years. He was so fine that I paid no attention to a spot on his left foot, right below his big toe. A spot, small, purple, like the stain of a crushed grape. This is the fill-in. The spot went on to become full-blown AIDS, and Duke ended up going to the hospital, and the doctors finally said they couldn't do anything for him, and Sky, his lover, had to bring him home. And this is their first night at home. Sir Duke, do you remember the first time we met at Peter Rabbit? I asked him the night I brought him home as we sat on the living room sofa, his head resting on my chest. How could I forget? You and your bunch of loud friends. Loud, I protested. Yes, very loud. You were all bitching at the bar, singing soul ballads and so off key, and Sky, you were stone drunk. I was not. I was just enjoying a nice Sunday soiree until you walked in wearing tight bell-bottom jeans and yellow platform shoes. Oh, Sky, remember them heels on those awful shoes? He said as we laughed hysterically. Do I ever, baby? You had my heart pumping and jumping. Dude, you look so good. I did then, didn't I? He muttered. And when the DJ played Hooked for Life, I had to ask you to dance. That night we played Hooked for Life over and over. We were two disco divas with 10 years of memories, the trips, parties, the steps, orgies, laughter. Sky, Duke whispered as I tucked him in bed and kissed him goodnight. Sky, I'm glad I'm home. I love you. Love you too, baby. I told him, thanks for all the good times. The doctor comes to visit, and they are informed that Duke could die within the week. Sky reaches out to Duke's mother, and she comes from Chicago on train to visit them. It has always been a rocky relationship between Sky and the mother. And we pick up on, you done perverted my son, you low down immoral. Don't you ever talk to me about morality, not ever. You have been blessed with 4 sons, but as I understand it, each one by a different father, and you have never ever been married to any of them. Shut your mouth, you dirty, but before I say something that God can't forgive you for, she yelled, lifting her hand to strike me. Go ahead. Why don't you bite me? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Why don't you bite me? I urged her. Yes. All right. I'm sorry. I need to go back. I warned her, holding her back, holding her arm, and stuffing my hand in her mouth to muffle her scream. Go ahead. Why don't you bite me? I urged. You'll get blood in your mouth, and who knows? I might be infected too. Go ahead. We'll see if this disease discriminates between gays and straights. Go ahead. Take a big bite. I kept taunting her. She froze. Now, you are finally going to hear me out, I told her, restraining her as she tried to move away. I met you once 9 years ago when Duke and I came to Chicago for Thanksgiving. It was our first trip together. Duke was so excited and anxious about introducing me to you. Unfortunately, you didn't like me then, and from what I see, you still don't. Well, I didn't like you then, and you better believe it, I still don't. Damn it, I was willing to give you a chance. I was willing to put up with you simply because you are Duke's mother, and I respected that. You were so mean when he told you about our relationship. You ordered him to break up with me and move back to Chicago because New York City was corrupting him. I bet you didn't think I knew about that one, did you? He was all in tears on our flight back to New York. I remember he couldn't wait to get to the dorm that Sunday night to call you. He was shaking from all the nasty things you kept telling him on the phone. How you didn't want to have anything more to do with him if he didn't repent. How you couldn't have such a sinner as a son. My Duke was so broken, and it hurt me that you had hurt him so. I could not believe a mother would actually be that cruel to her own flesh and blood. I remember taking him in my arms and rocking him all night long. Right then and there, we promised each other we would stay together forever, hooked for life. We helped each other through college. After graduation, I accepted employment with a record company, and Duke became a damn good accountant with a prestigious firm. We bought this apartment, and we've been living here since as man and man. Doris, sweet Mama Taylor, I have been good to your son, and your son, Duke Emmett Taylor, has been so good to me in ways you can't even begin to imagine. I don't expect you to like it, and I do not give a fuck, a hoot, or a damn that we don't have your blessing. This is our story, just the way it is. Either way, you deal with it or leave us alone. It was then and only then that I released her from my grip. Can I see my baby now? She asked softly. That Friday at 3:00 p.m., while his mother sat on the bed, held his left hand and read 23rd Psalm, I sat on the bed, held his right hand, and relived all our good memories, trusting the instant Duke yielded his soul. There were no tears. There was no time for tears that year, just a tight knot in the pit of my chest where it hurts more each day. Yet it had all come to this. a 2-pound plastic bag filled with promises gone, scattered dreams, and I can't even pick up the pieces.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Our next reader is Michael Ward. I'm going to read what Michael wrote about himself because he's very accomplished and my memory is not that good. Michael Ward is an actor, host, writer, and HIV advocate. He has numerous stage, film, and voice credits. His most recent credits include The Family Table, AMC Performance Company, and 1 and 2 Outfront Theater. He and Josh Jenks co-founded Black Gay Stuck at Home, a bi-weekly virtual screening series that centers on Black queer media. He is a former host of CNP's The Reckoning podcast. The show highlights Black men's health and wellness. His writing appears in Cultural Science and Wounded Souls, Black Men Speak Across Mental Health, Black Gay Genius, Answering Josephine's Call, and Our Happy Hours, LGBT Voices, and Uptown Magazine. Michael?
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I wrote like 2 sentences and you you can embellish. I was like, okay, great. Let's embellish. Yes, I will be reading from Remembrance. It's actually one of the plays Assotto had, and I thought it would be really cool to just read his words about him themselves as well. So, Remembrance. We lived in a 2-story brownstone on Atlantic. Addicts and alcoholics squatted on one side. This Baptist church sanctified the neighborhood. Each Sunday with screams, songs, shouts, testimonies, tambourines. Foot stomps and hand claps. The daisies I planted were such a soft touch. Straight A's, couldn't play ball, ran like a girl. Perfume with mother's cologne. Practiced piano daily. Wrote poetry. I was the type of 16-year-old folks saw and thought, quick, something didn't click. Mother's favorite, I never misbehaved like T. Clyde and Ferrero, my older brothers. Didn't stay out late like they did. She and I once picked up my father and brothers in the car. Father asked what I'd been up to, and I told him the truth. I helped my cousin Maurice dress her dolls right in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge. He stopped the car and knocked me out cold. T. Clyde and Ferrero discussed ways to change me from being there we go. Often mother took me in her lap, told me not to worry. We all waited for a miracle. After much study in the mirror, I decided 100 push-ups a day would do in this sissy in me. I'd be admired like all jobs. Guys kept ganging up. Split purple lips, eyes puffed black, red scarred hands. I found my way home, smashed the mirror. Took me months before I found Baldwin at the library. Million others out there. I read vengefully, spent every penny on Xerox copies, collected all I could, called them my dreams. At midnight when the house hushed, I fetched my dreams from the closet, piled them higher than the ceiling, higher than the Empire State Building. Hemmed in piles sky high, I rocked myself to sleep, clutching a dream close. And one afternoon, busy with the grill in the garden, Father shouted at me, Tiga Khan, Kit, Pran, Mansu, Palbeat, Sissy Shit, Ka, out of your system. I ran to my room ransacked, look out the window, my dreams up in smoke. The tears shaking off my head were not enough to assuage the fire that raged in my heart. That night, I picked up those cold ashes, a million stars as witness. I yelled, Kayo Papa, these words, my dreams you burned. They'll never die. And I split.
Oops, microphone. get to introduce now G. Winston James, or as Tony Daniels used to call him, Glenroy. Don't try it. That's for privileged people. G. Winston and I go way back, but I'm going to read what he wrote so that I don't, oops. It's in here. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I don't have to start making up stuff. I didn't know that you were Jamaican born. Wow. Okay. An author, an essayist, and an editor. And if I'm not mistaken, when we lost Assotto, you sort of stepped in to other countries in that editing position, right? He holds a BA from Columbia University and MFA in fiction from Brooklyn College, and is the author of the Lambda Literary Award and Furrow Grumbly Award finalist for his collection Shaming the Devil Collected Short Stories. He is the author of The Damaged Good, Poems Around Love, and the Lambda Literary Award finalist for the collection Lyric, Poems Along a Broken Road. His essays appear in the anthologies For Colored Boys Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Still Not Enough, and Love Christopher Street. Reflections from Gay New York. James is the co-editor of the historic anthologies Voices Rising, celebrating 20 years of Black, gay, especially some of the elders present, lesbian and gay, bisexual and transgender writing, and the Lambda Literary Award finalist for his publication Spirited, Affirming the Soul and Black, Gay, Lesbian Identity. He is also the author of an introduction to American photographer Thomas Roma's 2015 monograph In the Veil of Kashmir. It is so good to have him here from Florida. God bless and keep you. G. Winston James.
Thank you again for that introduction. And I guess I'll start by saying that when I met Yves, he was already not in his prime. Yves Assotto Saint. He was already not in his prime. And for me, he was one of my elders, and not just elder as a poet, but elder as someone who taught me a sense of courage that I did not yet have, because Yves really was something else, and had a form of bravery that not many people have even today, because funerals still happen now where folks are buried and the family is in charge of the funeral and the person's gay life is completely erased. I have someone in the room here who can attest to that just very recently. But Yves was the type of person to not let that go. So when I moved to New York in 1985 to attend college, I started with the Other Countries Writers Group in 1986, and that's when I met Yves. And I remember that Yves was one of those people. He was very real, and he wasn't always there because he was ill and then not as ill. And one of the forms of courage that I think that Yves portrayed was someone who was willing to go out into public when he was very unwell, when he had lost a lot of weight and he was, potentially suffering. But Yves wanted AIDS to be visible to people, and I thought that was important. But in the workshop, Yves was very real. So we had writers. I remember this has stuck with me for 20 plus years, where he told one of the writers in the room who had written his piece in all sorts of different fonts. You're sort of hiding, you're decorating the work as opposed to having the work speak for itself. And I remember Yves looked at him and said, Dana, you are not seducing me with these fonts. I mean, it was just this sense that the work was important. You don't have to dress it up, let the work speak for itself. And he also not only pushed us to write better and to write our truths, but he was also telling us, he would give us actually these will kits for each of us to write our wills. He told us how important it was for us to determine what happens to us after we pass. So I started out as a young, 19-year-old in other countries, and grew in that organization to become one of the co-editors, and for a time, its executive director. Yves had passed by that point. And as with Duncan, Yves was the first person to publish my work. And even though I had told myself before, whatever I can write, and I was putting together my little book. It is something else to have someone outside of you, outside of your home, outside of your friendship circle, decide that you have talent, and it is something to build upon. So I was in The Road Before Us, and then in Milk Black Bull, 11 gay Black poets. I've selected 3 poems from Yves to read tonight, and I think that they exemplify for me the way that Yves talked about desire. He talked about Haiti, and he also talked about AIDS, and in all of it, there was always this politics. And it's sort of this reminder for myself that everything that we do is political. I mean, my later work ended up being mostly about desire and about sex, and that's how I live. But, for me, that desire and that sex is also political. The things that we do in the bedroom are political. The things we do, in the bushes is political as well. So anyway, that's a whole other story. So I'm going to read 3 pieces from Yves. The first is Sacred Spells, which is in this collection. This is Shores. I remember Makis sailing the Aegean Sea on breakfast of feta baklava and sunshine. Pepe rafting through floating gardens while on a siesta of mariachi y margaritas. Abdullah, who sliced the Golden Nile with his felucca, bits of pita beans and English falling from his lips. Olive-skinned Mario of the gondolas who enchanted me with pasta pasolini and stars. Then, arrivederci. They all chattered about anchoring their dreams on America's shores. But do they know that Our Lady in the harbor milks us immigrants of the honey in our blood? Sorry, folks at work make fun of me because I'm always making photocopies. So it's a thing of mine. Souvenir is the next poem I'll read. Tracing back dirt roads, I wanted to write a happy, carefree poem for my country. Turquoise skies, amethyst mountains, emerald oceans, acres upon acres of sugarcane, miles upon miles of rice fields, thousands upon thousands of coconut trees, all shimmering in the sea's breeze. Drum beats that strike thunderclaps, pipe puffing ladies in colorful dresses, candle stiff under baskets of guavas, mangoes, papayas, ripe with sweetness. I wanted to write a happy, carefree poem for my childhood, lost too fast 13 years ago, somewhere in the air between Port-au-Prince and New York City. But I am left bereft by faces with no traces of smiles, eyes without vision. In postcards, Haiti is the pearl of the islands. Hallmark trick. In 1983, Haiti is a cemetery. Streets packed with zombies, souls sold to baby doc who boogies in Palais National like Baron Samedi. Even the banda lost its rhythm. Skinny Carrefour hustlers tickle their dicks for those few tourists who still dare, ensnared by magic. Every other woman's belly is laden with another baby. Every other man's head is laden with another figurine to sculpt, canvas to paint, tap-tap to drive. Bon Dieu, bon oui, preaches the priest who carries a camera, records confessions for Loup-garou Tonton Macoute. The land is parched with ash of infected swine. Everywhere hands stretch out of time to anyone for anything. The next is Shuffle Along. Hooked up to the same pole, IV garlands of cytidine and pentamidine unravel queer patterns of a survival ritual that strings us thread thin yet tight as life partners trapped in this marathon of disintegration. The rhythm mutates like the noxious virus inside collapsing veins and atrophied muscles. Blurry eyes swirl round the dying room. Dizzily we drag on, carry each other through the 11th hour, clinging desperately while time ticks. And I wanted to just close on one of the poems that Yves, I call him Yves, that's the way I knew him, that Assotto published of mine in Milking Black Bull. And I honestly think that this was Yves' purpose as well. It is called Uprising. I want to start a campaign, one that gets homosexuals to recall what it means to be gay. A campaign that will scrape away at millennia's worth of stone to unearth the legions of sissified warriors who lived, died, and worked their magic in, on, and about this world. I want to ignite a protest, to gather all the mystics in one place, so we might speak that one truth that will suck the moisture from the air and create oceans at our feet. That truth that will snuff out the light and remind the children that we have been here since creation. I want also to invoke the Bible, to say that in the beginning was the Word, and that word shaped the universe into a thing of so many wonders that mortal man can only fail to see, unless he admits that he is as blind as the stars, and much less significant than the trees that have survived far longer than he. I want to summon the truth of names and the defining energy that dwells within them, to let the mouths of our enemies show us that they have always known that we were defined by power. As the fairy's magic lives, the flame of the faggot burns, the strength of the dyke holds, and the gaiety of the queer endures. I want to ignite a blaze, a conflagration of lesbians who remember what it was like to watch their sisters burn in the night, struggling against the fetters that bound them to the witching posts and to the lies and to the angry penises jealous of feminine power, so softly displayed like iron at the hot core of the earth. I want us to shatter the windows of heaven with diamonds, to assemble before the throne of God dressed in the stars and holding the planets in our hands, asking the angels simply, are we not beautiful? That the rivers and the wind sing our names in the gloaming. If we are not, then God destroy the world, for then you have put nothing marvelous in it.
I have performed that poem. I want credit for that.
You can certainly have credit for that. We have Jericho Brown with us tonight, who's going to be finishing the reading for us. Jericho's first book, Please, won the American Book Award. His second book, The New Testament, won the Anisfeld Wolf Book Award and was named as one of the best of the year by the Library Journal, Cold Front, and the Academy of American Poets. He is also the author of the collection, The Tradition, which was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2019 and won the Pulitzer Prize.
Woo.
I want to thank, it's really an honor to be here, in particular with this panel of such talented people. I was going to read Remembrance, but obviously you should have it because you're a better actor. So go ahead. And I have to say, I've been reading G. Winston James's work, he knows this, since I can remember. And so I'm really happy to be sitting next to him in this moment. I feel like I finally made it. But big thanks really to Duncan and to thank you Franklin and Duncan for asking me to be here. I really do appreciate being included in this moment. When they asked me to do this, I of course had to think about my own personal relationship to Saint's work, and that relationship. I realized that Assotto Saint is the reason why him and his peers, his compatriots for that moment, they really are the reason why I do not mind cussing people out. I really think, because people are often surprised by this, my ability to cuss people out. So I think they can't imagine it. So they try me, and then they find out that I will indeed cuss your ass out. So, and I found that, when I was a very young person, I would get into a lot of fights. And I got physical fights. And I would get into these fights I would very often get into fights on the behalf of a friend. It was much easier for me to fight with the idea that I was defending someone else. But I didn't have the ability to do that for myself until I began to read writers like Assotto Saint, and to hear these stories that have been passed down through the years about this particular writer. I always imagine, and I thank God, that maybe I have some knowledge of this, but I don't imagine that my knowledge of this is like that of Saint's or of his peers and compatriots. But if you live in a world that tells you that you don't deserve friends, you don't deserve life. Do y'all know what I'm saying? You really have to be your own best friend. And if I'm going to be my own best friend, that means I have to also be ready to fight for myself. Do y'all understand what I mean? Does that make sense? So when I've been teaching poetry. I've been teaching poetry for 22 years now, teaching people to read it and write it and fall in love with it. And that is part of what I teach when I'm teaching poetry, when I'm teaching Assotto Saint's poetry in particular, that the poems do the work they do, but they do that work in a community of a kind of ferocity. I think we would all just say they were fierce, right? But a kind of ferocity, a kind of rebellion, a kind of standing up in oneself. That what Young read is so important, what Young read today is so important to me because I remember reading that and coming across the word orgies. And I remember thinking, oh, this is a person who understands that he has the moral high ground, in spite of the fact that he participates in that which is used to shame you. Do y'all to make you question your own moral high ground? Do y'all know what I'm saying? You have to, particularly then, if not now, but you would really have to understand that there is nothing wrong with you having an orgy. Some of y'all ain't got that yet. Do y'all understand? Like you find out somebody was at an orgy and you kind of, you know what I mean? But this is a person who understood that was where he wanted to be and therefore should be. And I think that's really huge and very fierce. I'll read you.
If you had only seen him in his leather.
I first read Assotto Saint when I was an undergraduate at Dillard University, but I wasn't at Dillard when I read him. I read him, of all places, where I teach now. I was on a fellowship at Emory University, and I was led to his work by a man named Rudolph Byrd, who is the person who told me who Melvin Dixon and Essex Hemphill and so many other people who told me that these people existed. And this is the poem that I think of as the most often anthologized poem that I used to see around a lot when I would go through libraries, doing all I could to read these people's work, because they were the people who were telling me that I did indeed exist. Let's see. Heart and soul. Every day, every time I leave my house, everywhere I go, I pin on my knapsack twin-petaled small flags to which my allegiance is pledged whole. These flags are not monkeys on my back. I carry them as a coat of arms, mantles of double brotherhood. They shield like second skin to drape my dreams. One floats rainbow, the other wings tricolor, both bold with movement. I am not ashamed of what they stand for. When their meaning is questioned, these flags are not chips on my shoulders. I carry them as beauty spots, markings of double brotherhood. They shine like mirror beads to reflect prejudice. One unfurls the future of the queer nation. The other salutes African ancestors. Both wave SOS signals. I am not afraid to stand my ground when their beauty is challenged. These flags are not crossbones on my life. I carry them as amulets, emblems of double brotherhood. They spellbind like stars to stripe America, glory that becomes me in tribal rituals and battle against bigots. I have honored with my blood everywhere I go, every time I leave my house, every day. That's a poem. That was a poem that was dedicated to Hemphill, and I'll just read two more very short poems that have been very important to me as a writer. I find Saint's work quite influential. He's a poet of paradox, but also a poet of the litany. One of the ways that he manages narrative sort of reminds me of Sandra Cisneros. Is that in order to push narrative forward, he makes these really long lists that get him to another thing to talk about in a piece of writing. He's also the poet that I think of as a very direct descendant of another queer Black poet, Claude McKay, another Caribbean American poet. But also not just in the way that he handles work, not just in the way that he handles form, but also in that sense of rebelliousness. Just two more very short poems. Old forms, new forms. Two ivy bags hang like masks on a totem pole, shrunk of solution. One's dried up while fluid's full, another drips life. This is a poem called I Once Asked a Trick. We don't use that word trick like that. You say trick. I remember when I was little, when my cousins wanted to be mean to me, they would call me a trick. I like that. I couldn't tell them I liked it though.
For the record, I did not answer the question.
I once asked a trick. I once asked the trick if he had a religion. Puzzled, he answered, "I'm a free man." I then asked him if he had a lover. Quickly, he answered, "I'm a free man."
Thank you, Jericho. I guess, ER, it's the question time, yes?
Yes.
Franklin, what's the trick?
What kind of trick? Well, they're magic tricks.
I'll explain to you later.
Someone has a poem. He and his partner Jan had this thing about tricks. It's a whole poem about tricks. But you can't, trick with a neighbor. You can't trick with a coworker. You can't trick with a friend. You can't trick with somebody who lives in our building. And of course, he broke off.
It's like nobody else does.
As we go into the questions, I wanted to note that in the frame is the copy that Assotto sent to the contributors. Oh, Tim, I'm anyway. My husband's out of town. Anyway,
Jericho is
There you go.
What's up?
He sent to the contributors of oh God, I just lost it. The Road Before Us, copies of the cover design. When it won the Lambda Literary Award, I had it in a file folder, and I decided now it needs to be framed because it is award winning and it was life changing. Yeah, question.
Hold on, Pat, I'm gonna bring the 14.
I'm usually not terrified, and okay. Well, I asked a question of the gentleman on this panel, the gentleman and others who are here tonight, that I would like to come out. I discovered that I was a poet, and I haven't read anything publicly. I have 2 short things I would like to do. Everything's done.
Okay.
Why do we have to wait till everything's done?
Do it now.
See, there you are.
While she's finding the poem, is there another question?
Yeah, let me bring that to you. We'll come back to that.
Yes, Doctor.
Thank you. I sit here to, number one, thank you. Thank you. I feel we haven't done, at least I haven't been a part of one of these since I think Charles was doing the tribute to Tony Daniels, and he gave those wonderful hoodies out that year. I always love a hoodie and a t-shirt from Charles. But that aside, I think the question or the prompt would be, maybe anyone could speak to how things are still strikingly similar from the different times that we've heard poems from. I just think it's eerily, strikingly similar. And I just wonder, would anyone speak to that?
I just want to say out loud a moment of respect and sanctity for Haiti. And that poem was written during not such a good time in Haiti, and now it's worse. And what kind of poem could come from a Haitian soul today? And how would they react to the poem you read? That struck me, like how prophetic he was. I think people still have tricks.
And are still judged for the having of tricks. I think it's also a thing. I mean, I think we have a higher capacity of pretending that we do not care and are unaffected by people's private lives and what they do in the bedroom. But in truth, I think even among queer people, that is what folk gossip about. That's part of what folk talk about with each other. That's part of what your sexual partners used to shame you when they mad at you. And they sleeping with you too. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I think there is something about that that's very sad. And it's completely sad that even after this time we still have that going on. It's just very strange to me that we still have that going on as a base of shame among us, when literally what makes us that particular identity is our desire. You know what I mean? And so how is it that we could use our desire against one another? That concerns me. And I think on top of that, and this happens in much of the writing, it gets what Michael read for us, remembrance, it's in there. We still have all kinds of hatred for anything that is feminine. And one way we know that is that don't nobody talk worse about a trans woman than a gay man. And I know that to be true. Do you know what I'm saying? So we still got that. And I think we still have families who are not on our side, and with whom we have to do a great deal of acrobatics in order to have our friendships and our loves and just have our lives. So I think a lot of that is the same. Yet, I think the landscape, and maybe just in case you ask, compare and contrast, I think the landscape is different, and the opportunities for achievement, whatever you think of as achievement, are different. I think the opportunities to be with a person that you love is greater. I think the opportunities to be public with a person you love is greater. I think the opportunity to make love and remain alive is greater. I think the opportunity to write and publish and have eyes on your work from many other people is greater. And I understand that all of those opportunities are greater now because Saint existed, because he wrote, because he loved the way he loved. And that's part of the reason why I appreciate him, appreciate his work.
As you answered, know that I recognize the Timum, of course, and Charles. And I love you, Charles, but not like I love you.
But that's just because you're not a trick. I'm going to do any of this conversation. I literally don't want to do with that.
Okay, so Pat, are you ready to?
I'm ready for one. All right. And I'm ready for one, and this was written in October of last year. It could have been written anytime since the ships arrived as with us as property. The title is Cage-Free Prisons. Unhoused, hungry, free, prisoner of need and fear, Children, easy prey. Hope slowly strangled, not human, invisible, muted indifference. Not blind to the need of easy, we might be next. Silent screams for help.
Hey, Charles had a question?
Well, G. Winston wanted to give an answer, and then Tim had and then Charles.
So one, I agree with everything that Jericho said a second ago. And I do think, well, obviously the landscape has changed in many ways. I work in government, in healthcare, particularly around Ryan White. And one of the conversations we have all the time is about how much of a barrier to care stigma is. But then the conversation, I feel, the conversations we have around stigma reduction and the solutions that we seek for stigma reduction are really ways to allow people to hide, as opposed to getting people to a place where they are comfortable, as Eve was, to say that I have HIV and that I am living with AIDS and I want my truth to help others. Instead, what we're doing is trying to get organizations to change their names. Instead of AIDS Healthcare Foundation, called AHF. No one knows their reason. I mean, and it's a very strange conversation to have with people because they don't recognize. I mean, I feel like, am I speaking English? Like, why are you not understanding what I'm saying? But I also know that it is hard to move the needle for people to get to a place where they are comfortable. And I also want to just reiterate what Jericho said. I think that the gay community that we can be the worst at judging one another. And I don't know that we recognize how detrimental it is to our community. I mean, I think the larger community uses disease as a way to say, this is the way you should behave, because if you behave in this way, you will likely not become infected. But I mean, I think that there's a story to be told about being sex positive and having as many sexual partners as you choose to have and making certain decisions in those choices and not being shamed by your peers because you like sucking dick. Actually, I'm not sorry. But, if you like sucking dick, or you want to have sex with guys whose names you will not be able to repeat when you go to the health department. Do you know who you were infected by? Yes, I remember what he looked like, but I don't actually remember his name. I mean, I think that these are conversations that we need to be more comfortable about having, and that we need to get to a place where we care much less about what people think of us, and much more about how we feel about ourselves.
And one way that stigma exists is people still have all kinds of fear about that same disease and will not take a pill that keeps them from getting it. Like there's an actual pill that keeps you from getting it. Do you know? I mean, and won't and part of that is that they would have to ask for it.
This will be pretty quick. I want to make sure we get the mic though.
I got you. We're not gonna take Jericho.
Not when I'm talking. Okay, there we go. Oh, that was about the phone. So I saw Assotto before I ever read any of his poetry. And I don't know if this is a question, but like something in the presence of someone that we might now refer to as gender nonconforming or gender queer or non-binary, I think was a kind of embodied poetry and a sort of embodied resistance to some of our binary understandings of gender. And I'm just curious how one's presence, like one's embodiment of whoever they are, right, of their poetry reflects not only the work, but the resistance. And I'm curious about those who knew Eve or who encountered Assotto. I just remember there were two people I saw in high school, and I remember asking my mom, like, is that a man or a woman? Because those were the terms that we had. And I remember my mom saying, I don't know. And I found something really powerful about that. Like my mom was like, I don't know. And I was like, damn, that is like, wow. So I'm curious over time, like now we have language, you talk about non-binary identities and gender queer identities, and this isn't to map those identities on someone like Assotto, but I'm just curious when you think of, I'm looking at this picture here, I'm just thinking like, wow, like I don't know. And that there's something powerful about not knowing when the will to know is so compulsory.
The term we used back then was gender fuck. And that meant that, you know, there was a particular pleasure, you know, in appearing in an ambiguous situation because it would make straight people and other gay people so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. And it was, you know, as to what you were saying about the feminine, you know, that how could a man act like a woman? You know, how could a woman act like a man? I mean, we had, what was it, stone butch? That was the that was the term. You know, when I was a tiny gay person, and I went to the bar in Macon, Georgia, and there were lots of stone butch lesbians and gender fucking men. I remember one guy who called himself Jerry Boobs because he had boobs, and he loved to take them out and show them. And it was just mind-boggling. I remember Fagala Ben Miriam, who was a very radical fellow, just in the same way that Eve was. And I went to hear him talk at the University of Georgia when I was a graduate student. And Fagala came out in a black dress. And it disturbed me. And I was really curious about how disturbed I was. Fagala later sued he was dismissed from a government job because he said, if women can wear pants, I can wear a dress. They fired him, and 10 years later, he was reinstated with back pay. So, pioneers. He was a pioneer in terms of shaking things up, you know, making people uncomfortable, making people question this whole creation of binary gender, you know, that there is a definite male and a definite female, and there isn't. And that's part of what we're here to, you know, demonstrate is that, you know, it's a continuum, and each of us is our own being, and he very much was his own being.
I said earlier that Assotto really respected me. What I didn't say is that when I went to national meetings or conferences or anything where they said black tie, I didn't appear as Duncan. I came as Amethyst. Because how dare you tell me what to wear? And I had, as far as I was concerned, in the late 90s, late 90s, I had to make a conscious decision to put a level of androgyny that I was comfortable with down. And it wasn't from, it was some about safety. Because if you look like a woman, you will be threatened like a woman. And I was. And I was pretty. And I know that was a problem too. And some of this anti-trans stuff is never about trans men because they've been around trans men and didn't know it and they don't care. It's about their mythology around what they're attracted to. The other thing I wanted to bring up was in comparison, timelines. Heart therapy or HIV antiretroviral therapy didn't start till mid-96, right? It allows people time. Before 96, if you had HIV and you progressed to, at that time, what we said was AIDS, you could not hide. And hiding meant you stayed in your house. and it meant that the stigma was in your face. And some progress has sent us backwards. And now you also can hide behind the digital personality that you can build so that you never have to leave your home and go into a community and really approach the person you love. You can simply swipe, I've heard. I didn't have to swipe. I've never had that kind of profile, so if you tell me about it. I've never been swiped, I've never swiped anybody in that way. You ready? For those of you who don't know, the powerful woman reading is Publisher, who's earned the right to read at Karis at any point she wants.
Hello to everyone. This one doesn't have a title, and it's probably because I wrote it at a little after 3 a.m. in 2012. I probably come back from a Sweet Honey concert. Sweet Honey rocks us, swaddled in rhythm we roll, chocolate symphonies. Sweet Honey soothes us, lyrical lessons unfold, unbridled fullness. Sweet Honey moans love, deepest emotions unearthed, singing us to joy. Sweet Honey lifts us, ancestral whispers beckon, harmonic lessons. Sweet Honey creates joyful, foot-stomping music, still on that journey.
Charles, sure. G. Winston wanted to say something about the last question. Charles, you are next.
I just wanted to say quickly that I feel like we've come a long way in many ways. But I feel like one way that, I'm not sure if we've taken a step back, or I feel like we haven't taken a step forward, is in having the ability to have honest conversations with one another. I do fear sometimes that cancel culture, we'll call it cancel culture, makes people afraid to be honest about the way they feel about things. Well, I know personally that lots of gay people still really don't understand the trans experience, but I feel like people are silent on the fact that they don't understand for fear of, being judged for that. I don't know what, again, unfortunately I can't offer a solution here, but I do feel like we have not gained the ability to have honest conversations that do not leave people feeling like they are going to be ostracized for the asking of questions. And I hope that we are able someday to get to that place. Because if we don't get there, then we're never going to really know and understand. In fact, what we're going to do is to act as if we believe whatever the zeitgeist is, and that is not progress in my opinion.
I founded my organization, the Counter Narrative Project, in many ways as a tribute to the people on the shirts, Marlon, Joseph, Essex, and Assotto. And I wanted to create an organization that was in many ways at the intersection of community organizing, but also poetry, because I believe that we needed both. And I saw that as a tremendous opportunity for healing. And many of the people I admire that inspired me were of the era of where poetry and community organizing and activism and literature just all seem to exist in the same frame very seamlessly. And that's where I see myself coming from in my tribe. And so my question is, and it kind of builds on some of the other conversations, what do you think that HIV advocates today, and perhaps even researchers and policymakers, but especially HIV advocates and organizers today, what do you most want them to know about Assotto Saint? And how can they use Assotto Saint in their HIV activism, in their service provision, in their work?
I'm there to try to answer, but the first word that popped in my head was liberation. That if you're, as advocates, if we're sitting there, not as, and sitting there for me means living rooms, barbershops, places where we are together, that we can be free there. And Assotto would certainly set you free. And free with his truth of his own life with his husband, his own life with his real life family, his immigrant story. And sometimes we're not doing better because we don't know no better. We don't know our own stories. And I'm sitting here feeling, and I'm being a facilitator, so I'm not gonna sit up here and weep, but the names on the shirts, and you did not send me a shirt or ask me to wear one.
You missed that meeting.
Yes, I did. But I knew those folks. I had their phone numbers. And so I'm sitting in such privilege about what they like to eat, where I took them when they came to town, where I wouldn't take them, and who Assotto would be running around with, or I knew he would connect with Franklin. And that level of knowledge, I wish I could somehow transmit to the next generation. Because I think some of what we're experiencing is self-imposed imprisonment, because we don't know that we have been free a long time, some of us, at great cost. And I had to say this. If you're sitting on letters and writing and poetry, ma'am, it is time to publish. It is time to put it on your blog, your whatever they got out there now. It is time also to go through those boxes that your mama's gonna throw away, or your brother, and give them to an archive. The reason Franklin has letters handwritten from Assotto is because they didn't have emails. They weren't stone tablets, they're just letters. But don't throw any of it away.
So this is, I think, a partial answer. I wish that all of us wish that Yves had lived longer. It would have been interesting to see how Yves' impressions would have changed over time, because the landscape is, again, very different today than it was when Yves passed. I do think that one of the solutions that at least providers in Broward County are catching on to is the use of peers to help both in prevention and in care. Because one of the things that we continue to see is new HIV diagnoses, which, and there's so much information around, but you think, everyone has so much information, there's PrEP. There's so many ways for people to avoid becoming HIV positive, but still year after year, so many people are becoming positive. And the next challenge is to keep people adherent to their regimens. And a lot of that is sometimes about substance use. It's also about being unstably housed. There's so many reasons why people don't stick to their medication. And we realize that one of the best ways to sort of get people to that point is to have them talk to people who are going through the same, who have gone through the same things that they have gone through. So it's not just a nurse talking to you, but someone who is homeless, who is making it, and can say, I haven't quite made it yet, I'm on the way, but we can get there together.
I'll just offer up as well to the boldness and the urgency, I think, of Assotto Saint's writing, right? Of knowing that you have this finite amount of time because of this diagnosis, which we all do, right? We have this finite amount of time, but we know that we're no longer going to be here. So I think with the urgency and the boldness and the writing, the full experience of what it means to be a person that's living with HIV, for providers especially, you're treating the disease, but I am a full fucking person. There is life outside of my diagnosis. I have other contributing factors, and there's so much more than the diagnosis and being a number, a statistic, and that I'm that person. And I think with Assotto, including, yes, the urgency of, I know that I'm going to die, right? but there's love, there's community, there's friendship, there's family, there's so many other aspects. Try not to curse as much. There's so many other aspects to a person that should be considered. And I've had to get on some of my providers about that because I feel like that does tie into the stigma of it. I think as well when it comes to challenging, even in the book, challenging some of the folks who were living with the disease, like we talk about, it gives the people ability to hide. But being able to know someone that is living with the disease and is a counterpoint that you can reference, I think that is very, very important. I will also throw up for researchers and other pharmaceutical industries that siphon off of Black gay men and Black communities that are living with HIV, is that there has to be leadership, there has to be accountability. The information and the data is there. Why folks can't find it, I don't understand, but that's another conversation. I will offer that for researchers and providers looking at this work. And as well too, as an artist, I find that sometimes looking at numbers and just saying, yes, you know, you won't die. This is not a death sentence, having HIV. Sometimes people get it from a poem. Sometimes people get it from a movie. Sometimes people get it from a play. That arts and advocacy can intersect, as you know, Charles. But I think that that is a useful tool when it does come to prevention, when it does come to stigma reduction, of being able to see people living full lives, even though we hear it all the time that HIV is not a death sentence. That I feel like that is something as well too for me, even in advocacy of taking to my work. But as you were saying with community, I feel like we have virtual communities, we have in-person communities, but what has saved my life, and I find so much with Black gay men that I talk to, is that we are often tasked with saving ourselves and having to provide this information that we don't get from other providers and have that. Just last night, with Black Gay Stuck at Home, we had a partnership with Advocates for Youth about getting sexual education to young folks. And that is still something, talk about having honest conversations, right? Knowing that young folks are having sex and don't have this information readily available to it. So even hearing these stories last night, talking to folks and watching a film from 2007 and discussing that language such as clean and are you clean, or all of those things that still exist in the space, even in a city of Atlanta, that's like Candyland. I can get whatever I want at any time that I want it, right? But even here, as we tackle it, I think that is something that I offer up, something that I task myself with as much as I offer that up to everyone else. But I think that is why it is important that we lift up the work and stand on the shoulders of the folks who did live openly and tell their stories, and the generation of folks that we lost that didn't have that ability to do it. So hopefully that's a helpful offering for you as well.
It would be nice if there was, I'd like to believe that we're in a dispensation now where we have, at least half of us, have a kind of understanding that you getting shot by a cop doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You know what I mean? And I it might be nice if there was somebody, once you found out that you had this diagnosis, that there was somebody to tell you you hadn't done anything wrong.
Well, it's in a poem, right? Like, what if it's a poem? Like, what if it's, you say that the people won't take the pill, maybe you give them the poem
that tells them to take the pill. Yeah.
Or not, it just tells them to live. It tells them, I want to shatter the windows with him with diamonds. When you hear that line, I mean, you can't not
be forced to act.
Yeah. I mean, I think Saint was understood that he hadn't done anything wrong. You know, and I think that's his example, you know. But I don't know if everybody, you know, people catch a cold and people think they've done something wrong. You know, it's also in our sort of our folklore, I think. You know what I mean? There's a way that we have experiences. You know, you got a flat tire, oh, you ain't thinking about Jesus. Do you know what I'm saying? like, oh, do y'all know what I'm saying? When we were just now, when we were talking in that light film, I was like, well, I wonder if I lied. And I know I ain't lying. Do you understand what I mean? And I think there's something in us that, you know, if you get, and it's not, I mean, you know, that's,
you know how many lights would have fell on me.
But I don't believe that. But I still, what I'm saying is, if I am fighting against that, for all of whatever reading I have done, whatever I know and understand, if I am fighting against that inclination, then where is everybody else? And in particular, where is anybody when you tell them they're HIV positive? Do you understand what I'm saying? And what changes in a very puritanical nation, by the way, I mean, the wonderful thing about these last couple of years of my life is that I've been able to travel more than ever and find out, you know, that it's us Americans who have all this weird shit about sex. Like, dude, like just weird shit. Like, you don't even know it's weird. And then you're like, whoa, do you know what I'm saying? There's a video that I saw just on Instagram the other day, and the joke is about a little sister covering for her older sister and brother because the mom has found a condom in the house. And the mom is, of course, she's upset because she just wants to know whose condom is this so I can know who to whoop. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you have teenage kids. I mean, I'm not a parent, so I don't know. It's just, it's like if I had teenage kids and I found a condom in my house, I would first shout hallelujah. Because they fucking. Like do you know what I mean? The impulse, the desire, the drive to have sex when you are 16 years old. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that is so natural. But there's something in everything about our particular culture and society that suggests that's the wrongest thing. That's sin, that's evil, that's awful. How could you? And it's literally what your body is telling you to do. Do you know what I mean? And so I just think Assotto Saint being good in the way that he was good and understanding I am good. Do you know what I mean? I am whole, right? Also understanding making a decision that doesn't turn out right doesn't mean I'm evil. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's sort of, it's more holistic, I think, if there was some, you know, a longer life after that diagnosis. There's so many people you encounter, but does anybody ever tell you that you didn't do anything wrong?
I just wanted to attest real quick to the power of sort of spontaneous conversation. Once again, I work in government, and we have like general funds programs that are outside of Red and White. We have Red and White programs. Under our general funds, we have a program called for mental health drop-in centers, where individuals come in, they do art, do poetry, they do all these things. We actually do not have this under Ryan White, and I've actually seen not here in Broward County. We do not.
It's the same law.
Sorry.
It's the same law.
No, I know, but we don't. So when we fund programs, we put out a request for proposals for particular programs, and we have not been funding mental health drop-in services under Ryan White. And so it's a useful. I'm going to bring this back to Howard about what we can perhaps do differently in our art.
You have a comment?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to be, that I could speak. Well, I just turned 70, and I just got married. But we were living together for a number of years. And before I retired,
A number of decades.
true. Before I retired, some days I'd come home and I worked for Marta, a very demanding kind of physical, mental job, and it was not easy being the very out Latina lesbian, you know. Anyhow, patriarchal structures. But I would come home sometimes and I'd be like almost broken down, and she would say, "How was your day?" And I said, "WOS, worn out slut." That's what it's like, you know? And, you know, I mean, I hoed around a lot when I was young, and so she was fine with that as long as, you know, now, you know, you can peruse the menu all you like, just don't order anything. And if they give you a sample, send it back. You know? So that is a way to not be tricking now. And I had some very casual encounters, and you meet a lot of women on MARTA trains. But I'm at that point now where I'm not having that kind of sex, but I don't feel badly that I did. I managed to say Catholic guilt. No, because I was reading what was happening to me, and I was seeing the possibilities. And that's what people should do. That's what I think. It's difficult if you have the specter of becoming ill. No, that's another whole consideration. You know, I mean, vaginal infections, it's not the same. You know, but I did want to go back to one of the points we're making about misogyny and about how feminized men or boys have such difficulty. When I was growing up, I was a tomboy, and that was okay. You know, like you can go out and climb the trees and swim in the ocean and you know, play with the boys and all that. Tomboy was okay until I got my bloods when I was 12. Then I was supposed to be a young lady. I didn't know how to make that shift. And going to high school like that was really difficult. It was really difficult. I had some close calls. But it seems to be okay now. But plus, when you're older, you get invisible. You're just not really seen out. So, I mean, that is safer, but not that fulfilling. So.
One of the things I was going to say is that I see your hand. It's good. We have so many hang-ups in this country. We don't even want everybody to be healthy. Because if we did, we have universal health care. We think you're supposed to earn the right to be healthy through your good job. Who will then pay your astronomical insurance. Oh, yeah. It's a little insane. And one of the, on this side of a number I won't name, I had to cope with, and it's why it's in my bio and why I'm out about it, is the same stigma that exists around HIV is around prostate cancer. Because y'all know that big march we have every year for prostate cancer?
Yes.
What march? It's Duncan going to the car. No, I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's a cancer. I didn't do anything to cause this. But it has something to do with our sexual organs. It has something to do with healthcare. It has something to do with how we embrace our health, our being, and we're not ready. Also, we had another example, and I'm going to let him. Right, okay.
I just want to be.
Then I'll shut up because
he must ask his question.
I'm happy to do that. I do want to lift up one thing in the chat real quick, which is important. So Mace Anderson is in the chat with us, and Mace is proud to be the executor of Assotto's estate and has been a close friend of his for many, many years before his death. He spoke at Yves' funeral and escorted his mother Marie to the Schomburg Center when his papers were donated to the New York City Library. He's very excited to share with everyone the fact that there will be another event honoring Assotto on June 15th, Saturday, June 15th, at the theater at the Riverside Church in New York City. He is currently the leader of the church's LGBTQ ministry and is spearheading the event for obvious reasons. So anyone who is in New York City is welcome to attend. And I just wanted to make sure that we got that spoken into the room, because Mace has been here this whole time watching and supporting this event. And obviously we want folks who are in the New York area or folks who want to travel to be part of that as well.
Mace, thank you. Thank you very much.
And let's get this last question. I'm going to bring I'm sorry. This last question.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful evening, everybody. So I'm very pleasure to be here. I'm a licensed psychotherapist among other roles, and part of that work is really looking at trauma and Black and brown men specifically, and a lot of folks have had a lot of experiences around trauma as it relates to HIV diagnosis itself, right? From the moment of this is the result and thereafter. And so I wonder from the folks that do Assotto, and I'm really curious to understand maybe, what was their immediate reaction to finding out that he was diagnosed and living with, and what were those maybe first few weeks or months like? Were there, what was that experience like?
Well, there was a period of time at the beginning of HIV where we were advised not to be tested, because if you were tested, you could lose your insurance, and there was no treatment. So that was a kind of a double whammy that people were dealing with. And so some people succumbed very rapidly to HIV. Others maintained health for a period of time. And I believe that Yves strongly suspected that he and Jan had HIV, because so many of their friends did. They lived in New York City. They were not, calm, or they went out and had a lot of fun, and the city was full of fun. And that was the epicenter of it. So there was tension. And I'm not exactly sure what happened when he decided to get tested. It may have been that he or Jan one got sick, with something that was likely connected. That it was just a weird time, because did you have it? Did you not have it? And of course, we were all looking at each other and looking at ourselves to see what was going on. I was in a relationship at the time with someone who decided to get tested and tested positive. And this was something that Yves and I shared. He was very supportive of me because at that time it was a best interest. It was like, okay, now you've been tested, you're positive, how long will it be? And so he and Jan were not shocked that they were positive. They believed that they were. But of course, there was this huge sort of letdown that, I was lucky. The wheel of fortune spun, and I tested a year later with great trepidation. and tested negative. He tested positive, Jan tested positive. My partner at the time tested positive. They died. My partner did not. He was one of the fortunate ones who somehow lived on, to the cocktail. So it was devastating. It changed everything. Probably, like I say, I have a hard time looking at those letters, but you can access them easily, through the Georgia State Archive. You can probably read it.
For those of you who were not around in the 80s, because you weren't born, you did get a moment of a pandemic that we saw come around the world and strike America or infect Americans like any disease that is going to affect humans all around the world will do. And you saw an absolute moron in charge of the country and in charge of how we dealt with it. And you, for a moment, also saw how the society dealt with the fear of COVID. And you just got a window into what it was like in 1981, 82, 83. And as the pandemic became alive in new communities. I arrived in 1984 as a small child. And where's the light? Anyway, and see, somebody's trying to call me because they heard me. Anyway, because of me arriving in Atlanta in 84, Atlanta wasn't conscious about HIV in 84. That was something in New York and San Francisco. We were statistically 18 months behind San Francisco. And in the 2 years that I lived here, it was quite aware. And I wept when I got my negative test, because I had done everything that the guys who were positive did with style. Jerry.
I know that. I don't doubt that for a second.
And I wept because why am I losing friends who did the same exact things I did? And some of them even fell for the mythology around monogamy. I don't know how, I'm not going to speak for Franklin. My heart is like bursting, because so many years later, we have brought Assotto back to Atlanta. And these gifted poets have read his work and brought him back to life. And we even had a pissed off Black Dyke come out as a poet and read And so this has been a phenomenal success. Thank you again and again and again to Karis Books.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
Buy a book and one as a gift.
Thank you to everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Franklin. Thank you to all of the readers. Y'all make Karis what it is. We appreciate you. Everybody be safe getting home. Thanks to everybody watching virtually. Buy Sacred Spells, Collective Works, and have a great night.